yes, we need to decenter men, but that doesn't mean that we need to put ourselves in that center either. Hello everyone, my name is Mina. Welcome back to the channel. And so today I'm talking about a topic that I'm sure you guys have heard of. Many people have kind of approached this topic of decentering men. And some people have kind of taken a very ultra feminist perspective of, you don't need men, like forget about men, like forget about marriage, forget about all these things. But as someone who is happily married and who's also a Christian, I wanted to approach this topic because I still think that there's some credence to it without kind of going to the extreme of like, saying, you don't need a man in your life or like forget men. Okay, so, I wanted to share that there's actually biblical support for this idea or this concept of not letting a man be the center of your universe. And I know it sounds crazy because, especially as women, we've been kind of conditioned from a young age to view obtaining a man, keeping a man, having a man in your life as something that, you should be consumed with, almost from the kind of exposure to fairy tales to this kind of pressure, depending on what culture you're coming from. You would have a lot of pressure to be in a relationship, to have the family, the kids, the white picket fence, and a lot of this is kind of surrounded by this idea of you really need a man. And I think what it's done to women is honestly a little bit tragic, in the sense that yes, you have a group of people who've kind of gone to the other extreme and been like, forget it, I don't need men whatsoever. But then also you have some people who are waiting to live their life because of a man, and then they get married and maybe they find some things aren't what they thought they would be, and they start to crumble. Like, what was this all for? And so today I wanted to dive deep into that. And the first verse I wanted to share is coming from Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, and it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And it shows that, God is supposed to be kind of like the center of our universe. He's supposed to be the person that we turn to. He's supposed to be what like wakes us up in the morning or keeps us going, or when we're feeling down. And I've realized even in marriage, is like, even if you're married to someone who's amazing and great and supportive, they're gonna have ups and downs, they're gonna have down days. And so if your complete identity is based on them, then you're gonna be riding an emotional roller coaster of whatever's going on in their life, right? And beyond that, even if everything is going well, they can't be your everything. And that is something that's so overwhelming to place on another person, especially when the Bible is telling us that that's not what we should be doing. Another verse that I think is really pertinent to this discussion comes from Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, and it says, you shall have no other gods before me. And so, sometimes when we think of idols, we just think of statues or golden images, but people can be idols. Your children can be an idol. A man, your husband, can be an idol. And so when we're putting things before God, that's not the place that they're supposed to be in. And so that's why I think when we think of this concept of decentering man, like, yes, we need to decenter men, but that doesn't mean that we need to put ourselves in that center either. At least coming from a Christian perspective, I would suggest that what should be in that center is God. And that should be what is first and foremost in our lives. And so, there's some people who are not in good relationships or positive relationships, and that's a completely different story. But I would suggest that even in good relationships, even in relationships that were brought together by God and both parties are putting God first, it's really important not to replace your center with anything other than God, and even not to replace it with yourself. And so I know, like, the normal concept of decentering men is you remove men from the center, you put yourself in the center, you think about your desires, your wants, your goals, your visions, your all these things. And it's not bad to be driven, it's not bad to want things for yourself, to want a good and positive future for yourself, but God is calling us to put him first. And when he is first and when he is the center, then he gives us the strength and the power to do all of those other things, like, go after certain goals, go after certain, things that he's placed on our heart, right? And so, we can still be our best version of ourselves, but that doesn't come from placing ourselves in the center. It comes from placing God in the center. And then the last thing I really want to touch on, and I've kind of touched on it briefly, is this kind of emotional overdependence on a man or a parent or a child. And oftentimes even mothers can place so much emotional dependence on how their child reacts to them or what their child says to them, and that can lead to another like emotional roller coaster. And so it's really important for us to make sure that the first things come first, and you will find that we become a better mother, a better wife, a better friend, a better sister when we have things in their proper order. And for me personally, I've really been working on this, the past few months, really trying to make sure that my center is God. And in that, I found more emotional stability. I found more happiness, more joy, more contentment. And I find that, the person that I am and who I'm bringing to the table exudes more confidence, exudes more peace, and that's something that people have even commented on. And so I would really encourage you guys to really, when you're thinking about who is your center, make sure that God is your center. And when God is your center, all those other, desires, wishes, wants, needs fall into place, and it leads to better relationships, and it leads to better self-worth, better self-esteem on something that's more reliable than self or a man, and that's God. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and hope you join me for the next one. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.